Hey, Cooper.
Hey, how are you?
Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Yay. Okay. So I am first time hosting a Zoom meet. I'm kind of nervous. Let's see who all comes in.
Good evening, Cooper. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing really good. Thank you. I just finally got on. I've got to print out go get a document I printed out, and I'll be right back. Thanks for being on tonight. I will be the host. Are you okay not stopping exactly at 7 if people have additional questions for you?
Yeah, sure. That's no problem.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to respect your time. Let's see. Okay, I'll be right back.
Why, hello there.
Hey, Jante. Did you log in as the host too?
Yeah, I think we can both be host.
Okay. I don't know.
When I have to leave, I'll just make you host.
Okay.
I don't think it should affect when I leave or not. Hi, Cooper.
Hi, how are you?
Nice to meet you. I'm Chante.
Nice to meet you.
There's Nikki. Hi, Nikki.
Hi. Chante, I heard you on the radio yesterday talking about the community center.
Oh yeah, everyone's been saying that. I did about like 5 radio interviews on like 5 different stations last week, so I'm sure hopefully everyone heard me.
Yeah, I was running an errand and I turned the car on. I was like, I know who that is. I know that voice.
Yeah, we're trying to get a community survey. We're in the vision planning stages of creating a Indigenous hosted community center in Rapid City. So
that is
it's
awesome.
Yeah, I've been on this board for about 7 years now. So we're finally getting some action moving here. You look very nice, Raymie.
Why, thank you. I'm just trying to keep up with my fellow panelists here.
Raymie, I heard you're going to be in Sioux Falls and it's when I'm going to be out of town.
Oh, figures. That's my luck.
I've got a wedding I'm in that week. So I'll be over in Iowa.
That's probably a better time than hanging out with me.
I don't know. They're gonna put me in a dress. I'm not much of a dress girl.
You could be like, are you gonna be like table number 7
Table number 7.
on The Wedding Singer?
Oh.
I would dress weird just for weddings. I think if I went, probably put like Star Trek memorabilia on, wear a beard. I don't know. No offense to beards there,
I
Cooper.
just hope the weather's good because it's outside.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm not saying that people with beards need to be on table number 7. Just,
Careful what you say, Raymie.
Hi, how you doing?
Else we could use.
It's 5 o'clock. Should we let people in now? Started?
I don't see why not.
Hello, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We'll just wait a little bit for a couple of people to join us, but while we are doing that, I will go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Chante Hart, and I am the Native Outreach and West River Field Director for the South Dakota Democratic Party. And I would like to welcome all of you to our Tuesday Oceti Sakowin Caucus Speaker Series. This is going to be a weekly speaker series. And so if you have any suggestions on anyone you would like to hear from or any speakers you would like to hear from, definitely send us an email. I would like to introduce our staff and our other caucus members on here. So if you would like to go next, Elena.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Beautiful Baldegal. I am a member of the South Dakota Democratic Party and a member of the Oceti Sakowin Caucus. I am also, I do Native public relations for the Democratic Party. I write the weekly column that comes out specifically from the caucus itself. I'm also a veteran of the United States Army, and yeah, I'm here and excited to hear from Cooper and happy to see all of you. Thank you.
Nikki or Kellen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'll go ahead and go. Hi, Nikki Gronley, Vice Chair of the South Dakota Democratic Party. And I'm so excited about the Oceti Sakowin Caucus and the work they're doing. We have amazing leaders here like Kellen. Kellen, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Maybe he is taking a bathroom break. But why don't we, until he gets back, why don't we start off? Lexi, Raymie, do you want to start us off with a prayer?
Pilamayelo. Uh, my name is Raymie Baldegal. I am a member of the Oceti Sakowin Caucus. I'd like to thank everybody for being here tonight. And it's a privilege for me to be a part of this progressive uh, um, series of conversations that's sponsored by the Oceti Sakowin Caucus. And I'd like to say, how tayayahi to everybody that's here, pilamayelo for making it. And I'd like to start off with a quick prayer, and then we can continue on. How to kashla, and petokili, mi chante kimichu yuskaye, eche toha ni toka wayaso kia wahina jiki, ima ya kukta. Tukashla, wichoni mitawa kia, and petuanji ake miku. Hion wopila ichichie, mi chante ki ichia taha. Matake, oyas. Thanks for joining us here tonight. Are we going to continue on with our introductions, or do you want me to go into our subject for the evening?
Yeah, just go ahead and start it.
Okay. All right. Again, it's great to see everybody on here again. Thanks for being here. My name is Raymie Baldegal. I ran for state office last year for the Public Utility Commission. I'm a proud member of the party and this caucus, and I truly believe in everything that we're doing. I currently work as an intergovernmental affairs coordinator for the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe, as well as a public information officer. I am also a longtime veteran of the United States Army, and I also spent a bit of time in the field of cleaning up oil spills and things like that with a environmental company. But tonight I am privileged to introduce somebody who I heard speak on in the Democratic Progressive Forum earlier, actually a few months ago. And I'd like to introduce everybody to Kooper Caraway. Now, Mr. Caraway comes from a working class family in Texas. His mother was a retail worker and his father worked in the trucking industry. Many of his cousins and his grandfather were union steel workers in Lone Star, Texas. He began organizing in high school when immigration agents, under the direction of the Bush administration, set up camp and began raiding people's homes in the small town of Mount Pleasant, Texas. Kooper Caraway, then a high school junior, organized a series of actions and demonstrations until the federal agents packed up and left town. He then went to work in Dallas for the labor movement. As an organizer with Jobs with Justice, he was successful in bridging the community labor gap. He has since served as a union rep for the American Federation of Teachers and an organizer for the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. In 2017, he relocated to the great state of South Dakota to serve as lead organizer for AFSCME Council 65. And on January 3rd, 2018, he was elected president of the Sioux Falls AFL-CIO. At 27, he became the youngest CLC president in the nation. From 2017 to 2020, he led the Sioux Falls AFL-CIO through rebuilding and was able to increase participation, affiliation, and member engagement. In September 2020, he was elected president of the South Dakota Federation of Labor. At 29 years old, he became the youngest state labor federation president in the nation. And to add on to his long list of accomplishments, he's here to speak with us this evening and talk about his work that he's been doing in South Dakota and how it's important to us. And also wanted to talk a little bit about the PRO Act, I believe. So with no further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Cooper Caraway.
Thank you, Raymie. Thank you to the caucus. Thank you to the hosts and the panelists. Thank you for everyone attending, brothers, sisters, relatives, comrades. Thank you all for being here. I want to start off actually and talk for maybe a couple minutes about Rick Santorum. I, like many of you, heard some of Rick Santorum's comments, former failed presidential candidate and now mediocre media journalist type. Some of the comments he made over the past few days, speaking this wild idea that is common in conservative circles and even in liberal white circles. This idea, this misconception that there was nothing here when the colonizers arrived. Seeing Rick Santorum and other people who stand up and say things like that reminded me of the sure, subtle, malicious arrogance that they speak with made me think of Hernan Cortez. So Hernan Cortez, for those of you who don't know, Hernan Cortez was a Spanish so-called conquistador, but a Spanish explorer landed in what's modern day Mexico. They landed, when him and his folks landed, they were welcomed into the city of Tenochtitlan, the large metropolis that had been built and organized by the Mexica people, known in textbooks as Aztecs, but they referred to themselves as the Mexica. And when they were being welcomed into the city, they were showered with incense and with flowers. And Cortez wrote in his journal, and it is still taught in history classes today, that because of that, wrote that they were treated like gods, that they were welcomed as gods into Tenochtitlan by the indigenous peoples, this continent. When the reality is quite different. The explorers, so-called explorers, even when they were home in Europe, hadn't quite learned the benefits of personal hygiene. They were not fans of showering, even in or bathing, even when they were at their homes. And so they had just spent many long months, mostly lost at sea. And so when they arrived in Mexico and when they were welcomed into Tenochtitlan, they smelled really bad. That whole group smelled really bad, and that's why they were showered with incense and flowers so that the people could be around them without gagging. But it's remembered, they saw this small gesture and thought to themselves, oh, we are welcomed as gods. These people must think we are gods. It's odd to think that same colonial arrogance has permeated and maintained itself since 1521 when Cortez first landed down there. And that mentality is on display, has been on display, not just by Rick Santorum, but by folks, policymakers right here in South Dakota, particularly as it relates to their relationship with the indigenous people here. So moving on from that, I am the president of the South Dakota Federation of Labor. The South Dakota Federation of Labor is made up of 20,000 working class people across South Dakota, and we have 80 different trade and labor organizations. So the way that works is that many different workers have their own sorts of unions, and all the unions are part of the State Labor Federation. So it's our mechanism for working together. And so there are unions that represent electrical workers, that represent food processing workers who work down at the Smithfield plant in Sioux Falls. There are public workers who work for cities, counties, workers who work for the state. folks like that. There are unions in nearly every county across the state of South Dakota. So folks who want to tell you that South Dakota is a right to work state, it's true, South Dakota is a right to work state, but that doesn't mean that there aren't unions here. There are unions in every section of the state. The interesting thing about the unions here in South Dakota is that they surpass typical party lines. And I'll give you an example. In 2016, Spink County, South Dakota, voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. Overwhelming, like most counties in South Dakota. Spink County voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. 1 year later, the workers at their largest employer in Spink County, the South Dakota Developmental Center in Redfield, chose to unionize. They voted 84-3 in favor of unionizing. Only 3 workers voted against it. The very next year, in 2018, only 1 year after unionizing, Spink County voted a majority for Billy Sutton. This is how quick things can change with a little bit of organization, a little bit of focus, a little bit of determination. And folks like to get downtrodden and they look at voter registration numbers and see that folks, Democratic or progressive candidates might be outnumbered. Or they look at state history and they say that progressive candidates or Democratic candidates might be outnumbered, or that history might not be on their side. But Spink County shows that with a little bit of organization, organizing folks where they're at, and where they're at is at work. South Dakotans spend a lot more time at work than the average American worker. South Dakotans, in fact, are paid less than the average American worker. South Dakotans are injured and die at work at a rate that is more than twice the national average. And so folks are looking for any kind of way to alleviate the dire situation that they're in. Now, what binds us together, not just the labor movement, not just the movement for indigenous sovereignty, and not just the movement for progressive policies, things like that. What binds all the movements together is the fact that we are all exploited in our own ways by the current system. Now, I want to talk about workers west of the river for a bit, particularly indigenous workers. Now, indigenous workers, particularly indigenous women in Rapid City, in the Black Hills, are exploited threefold. Now, all workers who work under this type of system, a profit-driven system, all workers are alienated from their labor. So all workers, even if you're a strong, young, white man, you're exploited for being a worker. You are not given the full profits. You're not given the full benefits of what you're producing and what you're putting out into society. All right. But for example, hospitality workers in the Black Hills, indigenous women who work in the hotels and the resorts, they're exploited in a much, much more severe way, because they're exploited once for being a worker. They're exploited again for being indigenous. And then they're exploited again for being a woman. I'll say that again. They're exploited once for being a worker. Then they're exploited again for being indigenous. And then they're exploited again for being a woman. They're exploited once for being a worker in a capitalistic economy. They're exploited again for being indigenous in a white supremacist culture. And they're exploited again for being a woman in a patriarchal society. They are triply exploited. And this leads to indigenous women going missing, being murdered, being assaulted, being harassed on the job. Now, there's a lot of talk about indigenous women when they go missing or when they're murdered, but not too much is discussed about the everyday, small, subtle harassment and assault that they have to deal with. The comments, the looks, the threatening gestures, even the non-verbal threatening gestures, the vibes, just the feeling of being unsafe at work, on your way from work to your car, on your way from your car to your house, on your way from your house back to your car, back to your job. These are severe levels of exploitation. that Indigenous workers and Indigenous women are facing out in the Black Hills and across the state. And the remedy for that, one of the remedies for that nationwide has been unionizing. Because what unionizing does is it takes the dictatorship that is the American workplace and changes it to a democracy. So rather than the boss, the manager, the district manager, the CEO, whoever it is who's running things over there, instead of them having full dictatorial power, they say when you're fired, they say when you're hired, they say what the policy is, they say when to write you up, they say when you get a raise, they say this and that. You get hired, they hand you an employee handbook, they say follow all those rules or you're fired. When you have a union, that employee handbook goes in the garbage. And then you and your coworkers sit down at a table and you negotiate with your boss. And you negotiate your wages. You negotiate your benefits. You negotiate wages and benefits that you need and your family needs. And you can negotiate safety and other issues so that you can make sure you're protected at work and you can feel more safe at work. If you want to negotiate to have a security guard that walks people to their cars, if you want to negotiate for the level of to say you don't have to deal with any harassment, that someone can be removed from the hotel, someone can be kicked out of the hotel, somebody can be kicked out of the resort for making you feel unsafe in your workplace. You can negotiate for those things. And a union nationwide has been the only thing that workers have been able to have that can give them that power and that bargaining power. And one thing that the labor movement is working on right now is called the PRO Act, which is Protecting the Right to Organize Act. So for a long time, for most of American history, unions were illegal organizations. We were treated by the federal government as the same way they treated street gangs, mobs. We were considered illegal criminal syndicates. That's what we were labeled for most of American history. It wasn't until Franklin Roosevelt was elected and passed the National Labor Relations Act in the 1940s that unions became legal. Now, before that, it was dire times. Things are bad now. It was dire times then. I have an 8-year-old daughter. Her name is Dakota Luna, my daughter. And she spent most of her day today in a nice classroom in Harrisburg, getting taught by a union teacher, and she had a good day. This is what she told me. Before the National Labor Relations Act and before unions were legal, she would have spent her time in a mine or a mill. Most working class children were sent off to work by the time they were 5 or 6. If you were Indigenous, you were sent off to a boarding school. If you were Hispanic, Black, or poor working class child, you were sent off to a mine, to a mill. You were sent off to a plantation. You were sent off to the fields to pick crops, things like that. You were not spending your days in a classroom. It's the labor movement that organized and got these child labor laws passed so that our children could spend time in the classroom getting a good education. It was the labor movement that organized for women to have the right to vote. And I'll say this: across the country, women are paid much less for their work than men are. Even when they're doing the exact same job, women are paid much less. Women of color are paid even less, except in a unionized workplace. In South Dakota, right now, today, in South Dakota, women who are part of a union, who work the same job as a man who's not part of a union, the woman makes more money than the man does because she's part of that union. And the very first thing that is negotiated in any union contract, when one group of workers decides to organize, the very first thing that's negotiated is that all workers are going to be treated the same. That the workers are going to be treated the same. If you're doing the same amount of work, if you have the same job title, the same job position, all that, across gender lines, you're paid the same rate. Across race lines, you're paid the same rate. The only place that exists in South Dakota is in the unionized workplaces, and we have them all over the state. Now, the Protecting Right to Organize Act takes the National Labor Relations Act passed by Franklin Roosevelt, and it adjusts it for the modern day. Now, the corporations, the bosses, the billionaires, the Jeff Bezoses of our society have had 80 years since the National Labor Relations Act was passed in order to maneuver the laws so that they benefit the employer rather than the worker. When the act was first passed, it was passed to benefit, to balance the playing field between the worker at the bottom and the CEO at top. And since then, the corporations, the billionaires, they've used every trick in the book to make, to find every loophole they can to make sure that the balance of power is tilted towards the richest folks in our society. The PRO Act, what the PRO Act does is it just brings that balance back to where it was intended when FDR passed it. The PRO Act would nullify every single right to work law in the country. South Dakota would no longer be a so-called right to work state. No state would be a right to work state when the PRO Act is passed. And that brings to mind, I remember when Donald Trump first wanted to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. He met, the US trade representatives met with the Canadian trade representatives. And the Canadian trade representatives, the first thing they said was, we are not going to negotiate a new trade agreement with the United States until you get rid of your right to work laws. It is unfair that Canadian workers would have to compete with low wage, low paid American workers. It is unfair that Canadian workers would have to compete with American workers who are willing to work for pennies, $7, $8, $9 an hour, is what the Canadian trade ambassador said. Now this, the PRO Act would get rid of those right to work laws. There would not be any across the state, across the nation. And what it would also do is outlaw some of these malicious attempts by corporations to prevent their workers from organizing. Right now, if a group of workers decide they want to organize, the boss can call a series, an unlimited series of mandatory 2, 3, 4 hour meetings and force workers to sit in a conference room and listen to a Koch brother consultant. These Koch brother consultants are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to travel around the country and run these anti-union campaigns. And so they bring in these Koch brother consultants, and they force their workers to listen to 2, 3, 4 hour presentations that, oh, the unions are going to come and take your firstborn child and sacrifice it at the top of Bear Butte, or they're trying to steal your money, or they're somehow bought off by the Soviet Union, and just any lie they can imagine, they can think of, they're able to tell, and there's no recourse. The PRO Act would outlaw those mandatory captive audience meetings. The PRO Act would basically force the employer to take a neutral position. It would force the employer to say, well, if you want a union, you guys can vote on it, but we don't have anything to say about it, and leave it up to the workers themselves. Many Republican politicians have put unfair pressure. They threaten workers who think to unionize with termination, with retaliation. The recent attempt to unionize the Amazon plant in Bessemer, Alabama comes to mind. 6,000 workers attempted to unionize the Amazon plant in Bessemer, Alabama. And Amazon went on a series of very malicious anti-union efforts. Number one, they bribed the city of Bessemer to change the timing on the stoplights in front of the plants because union organizers were waiting at the stoplights. So when a worker was driving into the plant, they'd have to stop at a red light. A union organizer would run out, hand them some information through their window, and then they'd run back and wait for the light to turn red again. Amazon paid off the city so that the red lights only lasted a few seconds, so that the organizers didn't have enough time to get the information to the workers as they were going into the plant. Secondly, they paid the post office, the U.S. Post Office, to put up a new post office drop box in the parking lot of Amazon. And then they sent out mass text messages to all the workers saying to take your union ballot, the ballot you're supposed to vote union yes or no on. Take your ballot. When you vote, just drop it in that drop box. Just drop it in the drop box. The only ones who have the key to it is the boss, but we promise we're not going to do anything with it, and all this stuff. And so the Amazon election has been challenged in court, and Amazon is being accused of violating federal law in 25 different ways. And so we'll see how that turns out. But the PRO Act would eliminate that entire anti-union campaign that Amazon ran. Basically, the employer would have to just sit back and wait for the workers to vote yes or no, however they wanted to. Some will vote yes, some will vote no, but it forces the employer to remain neutral. So far, in order to get that passed, we need 3 more co-sponsors in the Senate. It has already passed the House of Representatives, and it has received 47 co-sponsors in the United States Senate. Even Joe Manchin has signed on as a co-sponsor. Joe Manchin, who we all know is the world #1 Olympic gold medalist at fence riding. He has signed on. All praise due to the United Mine Workers Union out of West Virginia for getting him on board. So we need 3 more. We need Kristen Sinema out of Arizona to sign on. She has not signed on. We need Mark Kelly, the astronaut from Arizona, to sign on, and we need Senator Warner from Virginia to sign on. His counterpart, Tim Kaine, has already signed on. We just need Warner to sign on. Once those 3 sign on, it will receive a vote in the Senate. If it receives 50 votes, Kamala Harris will break the tie and vote in favor of the PRO Act. If it gets to that point, Joe Biden has said multiple times to send the PRO Act to his desk. In fact, Joe Biden announced this week that he is forming a new White House task force to encourage worker unionizing, to be led by Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh. Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh, a good union brother, by the way, long-time member of the Laborers Union out of Boston. A lot of union officials have been put into cabinet positions and whatnot by the Biden administration, and we expect the PRO Act to pass, and we expect Joe Biden to sign it. What matters most is what happens after that. And what happens after that is that lifts a lot of the restrictions, it lifts a lot of the barriers to workers unionizing. And so the important part is not necessarily the PRO Act. The important part is the organizing we do in our communities that come after the PRO Act. The organizing we do in the Black Hills to make sure that these women out here, these indigenous women who work in the hospitality industry, are not having to be afraid when they're on their way to work, afraid at work, afraid when they're on their way home from work. Is to make sure the important part is the organizing that is done in the Black Hills to make sure that indigenous day laborers, folks who just come right off the reservation or who are forced to work in Adam distracted me with this Boston accent typing. But what's important is that so right now, as many of you know, in the Black Hills, a lot of indigenous workers are brought either from the reservation or from the border towns on the reservation or in Rapid to work as day laborers. And they're told, okay, come, they're picked up somewhere, they're told, come work on a project, they're told, okay, come work for a day and I'll pay you at the end of the day. And at the end of the day comes and they're not paid. They're just dropped back off where they were, and they can't, there's no recourse for them in that situation. They can't go to the police. They can't go, the South Dakota Department of Labor is not going to help them. The government's office is not going to help them. The Attorney General is more likely to run them over than he is to help them. It's funny, but it's not. And so what the PRO Act does is it eliminates a lot of the barriers so that we can help ourselves, so that working class people can join together and help ourselves in the spirit of our collective nature, so that we don't have to rely on a hostile state government. We don't have to rely on an attorney general who doesn't care about us. We don't have to rely on a governor who doesn't care about us, a Department of Labor who doesn't care about us, a local police department that doesn't care about us. We don't have to rely on any of them. We have the power to organize ourselves in our workplace and our communities, so that we can depend on each other. Because all we've been able to, whether you're a working class person, you're indigenous person, or you're a person of color, you're a woman in this country, you've only ever been able to depend on yourselves. Oftentimes you've had to deal with hostile authorities, but all the gains we've had have been from depending on ourselves. And the PRO Act eliminates the barriers so that we can organize together and create a better workplace, a better community, and a better state for everybody here in South Dakota. At that, I'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Cooper. That was pretty. That was a lot of information. I had some questions that you already answered with. I've got a couple more, but first, I'd like to go to Nikki Gronley. She has a question for you.
Thank you so much for joining us, Cooper. I do have a question for you. I recently sat in on a meeting with Chairman Ray Buckley out of New Hampshire, and he is working with states across the country to work on caucus type systems within the Democratic Party, like the Oceti Sakowin caucus and what they're doing. And I'm curious if you see value in doing something with a labor workforce caucus within the Democratic Party to, look for candidates and connect people across the state and that sort of work. Or do you, obviously being the union, you have a lot of connections across the state. Do you see value in setting something up like a caucus? And I'm really getting used to this system and learning about it right now. So I'm kind of new to this idea, but a lot of states are kind of moving to it.
That's right. Yeah. So thank you. That's a great question. A lot of states are moving to it because in 2020, 1,200 union members were elected to public office across the country. In November 2020, this is at the federal level, at the local level, at all levels. 1,200 union members were elected to public office in November of 2020. The U.S. House of Representatives. I just had a meeting this week with our national AFL-CIO General Board and the leaders of the Congressional Labor Caucus. 2020, the U.S. House of Representatives, led by Representative Pocan from Wisconsin, organized the Congressional Labor Caucus. And there are 112 members of the Congressional Labor Caucus at the federal level that are either union members or who have committed to support union issues. So this is very important to us. It's been very important to us to get union members elected to public office. Here in South Dakota, we do have a number of union members who sit in public office. We have union members that sit on the city councils in Sioux Falls and in Rapid City. We have union members in the county commission in Minnehaha County. We had a great union member who was the mayor of Huron for 2 terms, just retired last year, I believe. But there's a lot of resources nationally available. Our national organization, the AFL-CIO, has a program called the Solidarity Grant Program. And they are willing to send grants to local states who want to spend time and resources recruiting union members to run for public office. Because when you think about it, you look around, a union member, even a union member that maybe the general public has maybe never heard of this person, but any union member has a built-in base of support. They have coworkers that know them. They go to monthly union meetings where they talk about issues. Oftentimes they're advocating on behalf of their coworkers, so they have a history of advocating for their community to get people raises, to get people's children taken care of, and things like that. And every union, because of the way the laws are set up, every union has already a built-in political action committee. They have a registered political action committee. And so we have thousands of workers across the state of South Dakota who give $1 out of their paycheck every time they're paid. And that $1 goes right into the Political Action Committee. So we have 20,000 union members across the state. And if most of them are giving $1 every week out of their paycheck, automatically deducted into the PAC, then we have the resources to support these union members. So yeah, a caucus would be good, and any way that we can encourage union members to run for office. Because what we've seen in places where we have had union members run for office, it doesn't matter what party they're part of. If they run as a Democrat, Republican union members vote for the union member who's running. Democrat, Republican, Independent, don't matter. Because an old saying in the labor temples, and we have 3 labor temples across the state. An old saying in the labor temples is, you trust the guy that's got the union card in the back pocket. It don't matter what letters next to their name. If they got a union card in their back pocket, then you trust them. That's why a Democrat can get elected mayor of Huron to 2 terms. That's why a union member Democrat can get elected to the Rapid City City Council, which is much more conservative than Sioux Falls. That's why workers who voted for Donald Trump will turn around the next year and vote for Billy Sutton, because their union endorsed Billy Sutton. And so that's something we're definitely willing to work and coordinate with. And I think that's the secret, honestly. People look around and they talk about how can we flip South Dakota? How can we make South Dakota more progressive, or at least balance things out? And so it's not 90% Republican dominated. I think there's a clear model. A clear model is you unionize, you organize the workers at work, and then you take that workplace, that worker organizing, that worker power that is built through unionizing, and you turn that into political power a year later.
Thank you for answering that question, Cooper. That was pretty awesome. I had another question based on that exact same thing, but Nikki stole it from me. Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate that. But you know, as a Oceti Sakowin Caucus, we really appreciate the ability to provide input into our platform and the policies that the Democratic Party has put forward. We were really key in participating in many of the different committees that happened during the state convention. And I could probably speak for a lot of the caucus members in the Oceti Sakowin Caucus that we would be more than pleased to see a labor caucus in the South Dakota Democratic Party to help us form those policies that are labor friendly, that would help our workers in South Dakota rise up to the benefits that their potential has awarded them. And so I really appreciate your voice on that. And on that other note, we talked about the responsibility of corporations and things like that, and how you took the power away from them and gave it to the workers. But you know, you also talked about Mr. Santorum in the beginning, about the words that he said, and it made me realize that you know, that if I remember correctly, the union leadership in South Dakota banned white supremacists from serving as leaders in the union, and that's because I think you felt at the time that labor has a duty to fight that in the workplace and in our society. And I wanted you to you know, we don't have a whole lot more time, but I wanted to ask you if you could just tell us more about that and why that's important to labor, and why it's also important for labor to be in against well, I shouldn't say against, but have issue with the like fascism and things like that.
Yeah, sure. So the broad working class and the labor movement in every country around the world, as there's unions in every country, we have a long history of fighting fascism in a lot of different ways. And coming off of 2016, we had a lot of us had a bad taste in our mouth here in South Dakota, not only because Donald Trump was elected, but because the narrative in the media was that it was somehow the white working class people who put Donald Trump into office. When you look at the numbers, working class people voted for Hillary. White working class men voted for Hillary. It's middle class and upper class white folks who put Donald Trump in, men and women. The same with the Capitol insurrectionists on January 6th. These were not white workers out there. These people were taking private jets. You know it wasn't workers because January 6th happened in the middle of the week. Workers are at work. We don't have time to go to Washington, D.C. to beat police to death with American flags. We don't have time to do that. Our folks are working, and so one of the things we had right after I was elected president of the Sioux Falls AFL-CIO, we took a look at our constitution and said that we needed to update it a little bit, and there was a section of our constitution that was talking about who is and who's not allowed to serve in leadership positions. And the conversation that we had, at the time, Secretary Treasurer B.J. Motley, president of the United Food and Commercial Workers Union, the conversations we had was, okay, so who shouldn't be allowed? And the result we ended up with was obviously white supremacists, fascists, folks who not only folks who are members of fascist and white supremacist organizations, but folks who through their actions encourage fascism and white supremacy, because those things are not compatible with the labor movement whatsoever. For one, a majority of union members in Sioux Falls are people of color. So if you're a fascist or white supremacist, you're not going to be able to function in our organization. But secondly, your goals go against all of our stated goals, all the stated goals of the labor movement. In the 1940s, the Ku Klux Klan used to round up union organizers, even white union organizers, and they would lynch them for trying to organize white and black workers together. And many workers across this country have gone missing, have been murdered by white supremacists, by fascists, sometimes publicly executed in front of their children by the Ku Klux Klan and by Nazi organizations and whatnot. In fact, the American Nazi Party has a propaganda video on YouTube that has my face on it, and under it, it says "the face of hate." They say I'm the face of hate because we are anti-fascist and anti-white supremacists. And so at the end of the day, it's the job of the labor movement. It has been historically the job, and it will continue to be the job of the labor movement, at least as long as I'm the president, to combat racism, to combat fascism, to combat white supremacy, and to do those things at every level, to do them in our communities, to do them at the ballot box, and to do it right there on the shop floor at work, so that we don't give these types of ideas, these type of sick ideologies, 1 inch to spread in our communities.
I really like your message of fighting that fight where we are. And I think what you're saying is more than just labor. It's a social issue, and hats off to you for taking up that issue and bringing it up in where we're at in a workplace and in our towns and everything like that. So the next question hand up was from Kellen returns from Scout, and then Pam Cole. So Kellen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. I apologize. I had to log in from the start on my phone. I couldn't get to my computer, so I'm going to stick in this format. I want to thank Kooper for coming to our caucus, and I want to thank him for from the portions that I was able. Well, I wasn't driving, but now I'm in my offices. You're definitely superbly prepared for to present to our group, and that's one of the things that I think highlights any speaker's commitment to being serious and engaging, and just being a good relative in the sense that you took the time to be prepared and put your best foot forward, and we appreciate that. So I definitely want to highlight also things that I heard in your presentation, and I think that well, I mean, I want to thank you for talking about workers west of the river, because I think that for us, particularly workers who tend to be inclined to, be Democrats are, largely we are the Democratic Party in a sense in West River, our indigenous communities, and we show up and we have no other political affiliation that has worked with us in the capacity that presently we have, and historically we've had a relationship in a sense that that has made us more inclined to lean Democratic. And I think that the part where I really kind of I kind of got a little I don't know, a burst of energy, but also it got me thinking about when you talked about the indigenous women and the exploitation that has been occurring, not only in the hospitality industry, but in all kinds of industries, especially here in our community of Rapid City. For me, it's an interesting dynamic because I'm a tribal member who I don't reside on the reservation. I reside in Rapid City, and so it's an interesting and a difficult sometimes balance because there's a whole host of the very things that you outlined in your presentation that has, I think, been a determining factor in many people's ability to come to leave the reservation and come to Rapid City or in any other urban area and be able to make it in a sense, if that makes sense to you. And it resonated with me because all those years ago, my grandparents, they certainly wanted to my parents to have an opportunity that they didn't see that they could probably receive in the reservation. And so they both, required both of my parents to leave and to find greener pastures and to make their way in life. And my grandmother also, on my father's side, she came with, and it was the height of the 70s. And for me, when you talked about those hospitality workers, that for all my life, that has been the image is my grandmother was a hospitality worker, and she raised her family, and in some instances she had to raise her sister's kids from tragedies so that they weren't motherless, and she did it being a hospitality worker. And so I always like to tell that story is that my grandmother growing up, she always used to tell me that your parents are working so much so that you have an opportunity for me to to influence you, and she did. She that image is something that I think is why I am so impassioned about especially women issues, but in the sense that you described it, that's a layer that I think resonates with a lot of people, because a lot of our aunts and grandmothers, the hospitality industry especially is one that they consistently, anybody that you talk to, they know somebody who either is there or has been. And to explain the exploitation in the capacity and the manner that you did, that I think puts a real vivid kind of perception about the need for an immediate kind of response. It elevates the immediacy, I think, of addressing the issue. Because for me, I've, in my time here, it has gotten, I'm sad to say, it's gotten worse. Because, the rights of these hospitality workers and the drive and the thirst for more profit has not seen their conditions and their wages increased or any benefits extended. But also I think that it's the cost of living has increased, dramatically. I don't know that my grandmother could have achieved, the kind of home life and that she would have, that she would want to presently under the conditions, just because I don't see a rise in the kind of wages that match the a livable wage, so to speak. So I definitely want to thank you for incorporating, an indigenous kind of aspect to your presentation, because that is 150% true. That's happening every day here in Rapid City. It's sad because, how you make decisions and you have to make sacrifices. And those sacrifices, those carry over into the other capacities and other aspects of life. I mean, you could either go to work and pay get paid your shitty wage so that you can put, a roof over your kids and your multi-generational family, head. But how do you feed them? How do you afford the transportation? How do you clothe? All of those things, extensions of, I think, you have a solution is to have an action that is going to result in organizing in a manner where, these are our indigenous, women, our grandmothers, aunts, our sisters, our nieces. That's an important, I think, outcome and takeaway that I'm getting from this. So like I said, I thank you for coming and interweaving the immediate need of people, our indigenous people of Rapid City and West River altogether. I think that we could, as our caucus, will take us, a strong look at how we can partner and work together, because this gets worse every day, and that's a part of the engagement. This is one part of the engagement is for me is improving the lives of our relatives. That's what we do, and when we work together in our caucus, we want to see the conditions and opportunities expanded for our relatives, because I mean, for lack of a better phrase, I'm sick of this shit. So I don't mean to cuss or anything, or if that offends anybody, but the frustration, I think you definitely can hear it in our voices. You can hear it, see it probably in our actions. And so I think it's definitely a good thing that you came here today, and I'm grateful. I appreciate the work, and I look forward to what kind of partnerships and collaborations that we can achieve working forward. And with that, I will pass it back to Raymie.
Thanks, Kellen, for those comments. We're running a little bit short on time here. We've only got a few more minutes left. So we'll have time for one more question from our former state Congresswoman, Pam Cole.
I wish I'd been a Congresswoman. That would have been super cool. Thanks for holding this tonight. And Cooper, thanks as always for all of your wonderful comments. It always gives me a lot to think about. I think there's just so many intersections here between Native people, workers in the tourism industry, healthcare industry, all of that. My question to you is, when the leaders, so our governor and others that are deflecting all the time, and they're not really coming up with any real solutions, but they throw all of those messages of hate, especially they throw out the word socialism and now communism. And I find that really hard to counteract. So it kind of goes along with what you were saying earlier with fascism, but how can we message? What ideas do you have for us to just counteract that extreme? They just throw that out, it just sticks, and they always invoke fear. So what do you suggest we do differently?
Yeah, so that's a big question. And so I can only speak for the labor movement. So we have our own internal educational curriculum. And so we have the ability, usually negotiated in most of our union contracts, where we can get folks off their shift and on paid time to come participate in a union curated educational, political educational curriculum. And so the AFL-CIO's educational curriculum for workers is called CSE, Common Sense Economics. And it takes on political issues, social issues, workplace issues, and it's a series of trainings on damn near every topic you can think of, but it's oriented towards workers, working class values. A lot of times, there's as you look in a lot of the ways people vote and whatnot, a lot of people who are very, very, very active in the Democratic Party, or who maybe are high-ranking officials at the DNC or whatnot, often take sometimes an overly academic approach to discussing some of these topics, particularly as it relates to people of color, as it relates to policing, as it relates to foreign policy, and as it relates to culture. Cultural issues, LGBT rights, things like that. So a lot of times the messaging that's coming right from the party is oftentimes a little bit overly academic, and they're doing a little bit too much where maybe less is more effective. And so I'll give you an example. When I was first elected, a majority of workers, a slim majority, but a majority of workers were hesitant when it came to LGBT issues, or at least, they were hesitant when it came to how much time people were spending talking about it. They're hesitant when it comes to issues like a woman's right to choose and things like that. And all we've done with the Common Sense Economics curriculum is tweak it so that it makes sense to the average worker. Right. And so instead of going into the long academic discussion of why you should support the rights of LGBT people, what we ask a series of questions. Number one, we say, whose business is it? If I'm talking to a worker, I say, whose business is it who you have a relationship with? What your relationship is at home, who you're dating, who you're having sex with. Tell me whose business is it? And they'll say, well, I don't know. I say, okay, well, answer me this. Is it your boss's business? And they'll say, hell no, it's not my boss's business. Okay, if it's not your boss's business, is it the government's business? And they say, hell no, it's not the government's business. And I say, okay, if it's not your boss's business, it's not your government's business, whose business is it? And they'll say, it's my business. I say, okay, it's your business, what type of relationships you have, right? And they say, yeah, it's my business. Okay, so it's everyone else's business too, what type of relationships they have. It's their individual's business, no one else's business. And then suddenly workers, it clicks and they get it and they say, oh, okay, you're right. Why are we even talking about it? It's no one, you should be able to marry and be in relationships with whoever you want to. The same when it comes to a woman's right to choose. We ask, whose business is it? What your woman coworker, what your wife, what your daughter, what your sister, what business is it? Whose business is it? What they're discussing with their doctor? Whose business is that? And I say, well, it's no one's business. It's between her and the doctor. Oh, you're right. It's between her and the doctor. So it's not the boss's business and it's not the government's business. It's between her and the doctor. And suddenly they get it. They say, you know what? You're right. It's between her and the doctor, or it's a family thing. Leave the government out of it. Leave the boss out. Sure as hell, leave the boss out of it. So things click, and now suddenly they're more willing to support candidates who support a woman's right to choose. Suddenly they're more willing to support candidates that are pro-LGBT rights. Suddenly these things just start clicking. But it all goes back, the very foundation of it is meeting working class folks where they're at and talking to them in language they understand. Because the reality is if 2016 taught you anything, the reality is that workers and most voters in general are not voting with their brains. They're not voting with their brains. They're not, carefully considering things as much as they should. They just don't use their brains to vote. They're using their gut. They're going with their gut. Who's speaking my language? Who understands me? Who's got my back? And that's and if you can convince them of that, then they'll support those things. And so that's the approach we've taken, just meeting folks where they're at, and we've seen some success when it comes to messaging in that way.
That's certainly a really good emphasis on the way to message. It was a great question Pam. Thank you for that. And I really, again, want to pitch to you, and I see that there are other members of the labor movement on here tonight. Thank you guys all for coming out. I just want to do one more. We don't have anybody in queue, so if anybody has a question for Mr. Caraway before we conclude for the evening, by all means, raise your hand or let me know, and we'll ask that question. But again, I'd also like to say thanks for telling us about that. Oh, it looks like Mr. Weiland has a question. So if I'll hand the reins off to him.
Hey, thanks, Raymie. Cooper, quick question for you. That's somewhat tied up in the labor movement, but it's a little more generally politically related. So obviously, the state of Pennsylvania has a relatively robust organized labor movement. Is that correct?
That's right.
So I would ask you, sir, has the South Dakota State Federation of Labor taken a position on this potential primary that is brewing in the state of Pennsylvania for the soon-to-be vacated seat of Senator Toomey between, I believe, the lieutenant governor and who is, I think he's a enrolled member of the IBEW, correct?
He is.
Yeah, no, just kind of curious to get your sense on that election. I don't know if that's too off topic, but I couldn't. It's just very interesting because you've got two very progressive individuals. One's a union guy. I'm unsure if the congressman is a union member or not. I know he's from North Philly, but it's just kind of interesting to take the pulse of our friends at labor and kind of see how you guys are thinking about this stuff.
Yeah, so all I can say about that is, so the South Dakota Federation of Labor does not endorse in Pennsylvania primaries.
Okay.
Lieutenant Governor Fetterman is a dear friend of mine. He's a dear friend of labor, and we've historically supported everything he's wanted to do. But that's all I can say on that.
Fair enough.
Thank you for that question. And since we have Mr. Weiland on here, there is a question of Medicaid expansion in South Dakota. So bringing it back to South Dakota, what's the labor take on Medicaid expansion in South Dakota?
Yeah, so the South Dakota Federation of Labor, along with most of our unions, have endorsed the effort to expand Medicaid. Our official position is that healthcare is a human right. Healthcare, every single person deserves the right to have healthcare, particularly American workers. There's no reason why American workers don't deserve the same benefits and rights that workers all over the world receive. There's no reason why workers in America should have fewer benefits than workers in Europe or Cuba or China or Laos or Vietnam or South America or parts of Africa and the Middle East. There's no reason why American workers should be one of the only ones that don't have guaranteed access to health care. No reason at all. Particularly here in South Dakota, where we're only a short few hours drive away from a nation that does value the workers in their country and does guarantee health care for all folks. There's no reason why Americans should have to travel to Canada, should have to travel to Mexico for healthcare procedures, should have to travel over to Cuba to get healthcare procedures. There's no reason any of that. Working class folks here in the United States deserve all the same rights and benefits that workers around the world have. And so our ideological and principal position is that every single worker deserves health care, free at the point of service. However, we are also supporting the effort to expand Medicaid to an additional 40,000 South Dakotans through a ballot initiative here in South Dakota. We've put our resources behind it, and we're currently lobbying our national and international labor organizations to throw their resources behind it. Because there's, like my brother Kellen said, these issues, the issue with working class and particularly working class and indigenous issues is that they get worse day by day. These are active issues. People say, oh, wait and see. Oh, wait your turn. Oh, let's wait and see how this election turns out, that election turns out. When the problem with waiting when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to safety, when it comes to white supremacy, stuff like this, the problem with waiting is that every day someone dies who didn't need to die. Every day someone has an increasingly dangerous health condition that they can't see a doctor for. Every single day the issue gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And so the Medicaid expansion is one of the issues, like the issues facing Indigenous workers West River. These issues require immediate attention, require an immediate remedy, and the South Dakota Federation of Labor is willing to put any resources, all of our manpower behind reaching these immediate remedies.
Thank you for that. We have another question from Elena.
Thank you. Hi, Cooper. So recently, the United Mine Workers of America announced that they would support Joe Biden's plan to move from the coal industry and transition into cleaner industry. Have you seen any kind of pushback, or what has your message been to workers who may be displaced by this transition into new clean energy?
So, number one, the position of the labor movement is very clear when it comes to the transition. And our position is there are no jobs on a dead planet. There are no jobs on a dead planet. It don't matter if you're getting paid $20 an hour, if your kids can't drink the water, if you can't breathe the air when you go outside, if nothing's growing when you plant a seed in the ground. There are no jobs on a dead planet. We have a relationship, we have a responsibility to maintain a healthy relationship with the planet that gives us life and that produces that which gives us life. So that is our number one principal position. Number two, though, we do not believe that it was not working class people who made the decisions to get us into these damaging environmental policies and create these damaging industries. It was the millionaires and billionaires of the day during the Industrial Revolution that got us into these industries. And so it should not be, the transition should not be done in a way that leaves workers out to dry, that causes workers not to be able to feed their families. So our position is we need a complete transition from harmful industries to clean industries. However, that transition must be a just transition. And when we say a just transition, we mean workers need to be at the table and need to be a majority at the table when it comes to discussing how the transition is made, so that we can make sure that there are not workers that are displaced, that are not children that are going to sleep hungry, and all these things. I believe that the bosses and the rich folks, the industry leaders and whatnot, the fossil fuel industries, the oil and gas industries, these executives in these industries and the Republicans that the executives buy off, I do not believe for a second the messaging that they try to get by, that we have to somehow choose between jobs and a healthy planet. We have to choose between wages and maintaining our economic presence in the community, and choose between that and being able to drink water. I don't believe that for a second. Human beings have been able to feed their family and take care of the planet for thousands of years before Columbus ever knew that this land was over here. And so there's no reason that we ought to buy in to the bullshit that the executives are trying to sell. Okay, number one, we have to transition away from these harmful industries. Our number one responsibility is to the planet. Our number two responsibility is to each other. And I think through a just transition that we can honor our responsibilities to the planet, to each other, and to the 7 generations that are coming after us.
Thank you. That was really good. That hits home to me personally. I worked in environmental industry for many years, and my job was cleaning up oil spills that were caused by these corporations. I loved it. It was fulfilling. But you're right. It needs to be just. And I think the work that we need to be doing, the job that we need to be doing, is taking care of this planet. And when we do that, we take care of each other as well. So, Cooper, I really enjoyed this talk tonight. I can't thank you enough for shining a light on the subject of labor here in South Dakota. I want to join a labor union. It seems like we're like here, and and you're making the invisible visible when you're working with labor and organizing it and helping us guide ourselves, whether it's politically or socially in our communities. And um, I think we're divisible because we're invisible. And the more work that you do to make us visible, it will just have huge payoffs for us as a state, as a whole. And so I can't thank you enough for that. And I encourage you to work with the party, and I encourage the party to work with you, giving labor a space in the party so that you can tell us what those concerns are, help us guide policy for the future of South Dakota and labor in general. I think we could be fast friends, and we'll make a great future together if we keep working together. And I can't thank you enough for that. So everybody at the AFL-CIO and all the labor unions throughout South Dakota, I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. It feels like it's only the beginning. So I wish you guys luck. And if there's anything I can do to help you guys out, let me know. And I'll be happy to help you. Again, thanks everybody for showing up tonight. Everybody who's part of the union, who isn't part. And that's, I think it. We don't have any other questions lined up for this evening's visit. We did put your information and some other information in the chat. So if people want to go there real quick and check out some of the links. I believe your page was the first one posted. Yep. And with that, I will give you the final word to close out the session tonight.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. Thank you for all the work you all are doing with the caucus and organizing the caucus. I believe that labor and the indigenous communities are natural allies. And there's no reason for us. You're absolutely right. We're divisible because we're invisible. And folks who and if we don't work together, if we can continue to be, if we continue not to build these relationships and things like that, then the Republicans, the bosses, the corporations, all that will continue to pit our people against each other. They'll continue to go to white workers and they'll say, well, we'd like to give you a high-paying pipeline job, but the damn Democrats are cutting off the pipelines, or the damn indigenous communities are complaining about it, or this or that. We know all of those tricks have been going on for 200 years, and they're bullshit. So as long as we work together and organize together and build community, then there's no amount of lies, no amount of bullshit can separate us.
Thank you, Cooper. Your words have been informative, encouraging, and I look forward to the next opportunity we have to work together. And please don't count the party out in helping you achieve those goals. And we would love your input in developing a labor platform that benefits everybody. So thank you for that, and thank everybody for joining us tonight. We have another talk coming up. What's the next date, Elena?
Oh, so we do these weekly speaker series sessions every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Central, 5 p.m. Mountain. I still haven't confirmed the next speaker, but we do put it on our Facebook page, and we update the SDDP website with that information.
Awesome. Okay, so look forward to another meeting next week, and I look forward to seeing you guys all there. So have a great rest of the evening, and thanks for coming out tonight. Pila Mayelo.